I'm Jacob Courtwright, and this is The Locker Room. Ladies and gentlemen, I bring you over 52 hours of preparation between this Last Dance special and the Michael Jordan vs. LeBron James GOAT debate next week. Without further ado, The Last Dance.
Everybody get up, it's time to slam now. We got the real jam going down. Welcome to the Space Jam. Here's your chance, do your dance at the Space Jam. Alright.
As promised, ladies and gentlemen, the Last Dance special is here. It was a little tough. This past Sunday were the last two episodes of The Last Dance, episodes 9 and 10, but I was able to digest them. I was able to take them in. I was able to get my thoughts down onto paper and here to you all today on the podcast. We're going to do something special here. So for those of you who have seen the documentary, you understand that it was a 5-week series, 2 episodes per Sunday, and it was a timeline that jumped between the 98 season, which was the last season this Bulls team was together, and then it would jump back to the beginning of Michael's career or Pippen's career or Rodman, or it talked about Phil Jackson. So I'm going to do one big takeaway from each episode, and then I'm going to address the 98 season on the very last episode and kind of sum up the very end of The Last Dance all on one episode. So we're going to dive into the individual players and or the individual main storyline that was going on. And then at the very end, we'll get into the 98 season. So here we go. The Last Dance Episode 1. The Last Dance Episode 1 was the younger generation's introduction into Michael Jordan's greatness and the older generation's memories of Michael Jordan's greatness. In this episode, we see some wonderful stories. We see Michael Jordan at North Carolina. We see Michael Jordan hitting the shot over Georgetown. We see the NBA draft where Michael was drafted 3rd. We see people constantly knocking on his size because it was a big man's league back then. We see Jordan become the Rookie of the Year, averaging over 28 points, 4th in steals. What I took away from this episode was Michael Jordan was a project player. Michael Jordan was not somebody who could come out of high school and instantly dominate the NBA. North Carolina was essential for Michael Jordan to become Michael Jordan. Jordan is the most driven and hardest working athlete to ever grace this earth. Michael Jordan found motivation in any situation he was in. Michael Jordan would make up motivation in order for him to beat himself and become greater. It all started at North Carolina. North Carolina was necessity for Michael Jordan's growth. Georgetown, the shot he hit against Georgetown was our first glimpse of Michael Jordan. Jordan hitting that shot, not having a fantastic whole game where, the big storybook where Jordan has 45 points and then hits the buzzer beater, struggling a little bit, but in big moments, Michael Jordan takes the big shots and he makes them. That was our first glimpse of Michael Jordan being great. Then we go ahead and move on to the NBA draft. Akeem Olajuwon and Sam Bowie get taken over Michael Jordan. This was motivation Michael Jordan would use for his first 8 years in the league. Michael Jordan's size was constantly being knocked. Standing at 6'6", he had a very thin frame, but he was going into a league dominated by big men. So for him to be taken 3rd overall was a huge ordeal. Jordan, as we know, goes on, wins Rookie of the Year over Akeem Olajuwon, who was taken number 1 overall. He averaged over 28 points, 4th in steals. And what Michael Jordan decided early in his career was that his game would do the talking for his legacy, not his mouth. But Michael Jordan did not become Michael Jordan the second he went to high school, or the second he went to college, or the second he graduated college. We didn't see the Michael Jordan and the MJ that we loved until 4 years into the league when Michael became Michael. Micheal Jordan was a project. That's not saying that he wasn't great when he got to the league. That was an incredible rookie year. He had an injury early on as well. But about his 4th playing season, you really saw Micheal take the form of Micheal. That's why Micheal Jordan is the most driven and hardest working athlete in the history of sports. It's not even close. Jordan was cut as a freshman from his high school team. Got to college, he wasn't the instant star that everybody thought he was going to be. He hits the shot over Georgetown, and then we start seeing glimpses of Micheal Jordan. Then he has a very good next year. Leaves his junior year, enters the NBA, gets a little miffed that he's taken 3rd overall. These are all motivating factors that slowly started building MJ. Slowly started building like Mike, Air Jordan. Slowly started building a Mount Rushmore basketball player. So Micheal Jordan was a project, but the end result was an A+. Episode 2, we have the Scottie Pippen Chronicles. We see Pippen's home life. He grew up very poor. He grew up having to take care of a crippled father and a crippled brother. We see Scottie Pippen struggle to get even one college offer. Then we see Pippen take an incredible growth spurt, and we see him start to emerge as a top player in the country, as a very good player in the country. We see Scottie Pippen taken 5th overall in the NBA draft. And my biggest takeaway from this episode, Scottie Pippen was underappreciated and underpaid. Pippen was the first glimpse of a modern-day LeBron James. Stood at around 6'7.5", had guard skills, but played with that size and that big frame. Pippen, when he first got into the league, had a very rough start as well. From being gambled out by Micheal Jordan to Charles Oakley kind of bullying him his entire freshman season of the NBA. Pippen deserves more. He deserved more money. He deserved more credit. Pippen stepped up in some big ways and really helped carry Micheal in situations when Micheal was down. Now, I'm not saying that was every night, because Micheal Jordan had very few off nights. But Scottie Pippen always seemed to be that second go-to guy when Jordan was being double-teamed, or when Jordan had his nights where he just wasn't on. Pippen took the worst deal in NBA history, 7 years, $18 million. For a career, he averaged 16 points, 6 rebounds, and 5 assists. I say that's a pretty good partner to have on a Bulls team. You do see Pippen's kind of negativity towards Krause and towards the organization. He doesn't want to mess up his summer. So in the 98 season, Scottie Pippen decides to have surgery at the beginning of the season and not over the summer. So we do see Scottie Pippen's bitterness towards the Bulls, and bitterness towards his contract, and bitterness towards not getting enough respect and not getting enough credit. You know, I know that in the documentary, Jordan was upset with Pippen, saying that he should have done this and should have done that. I mean, if I'm Scottie Pippen, I'm going to Jordan and saying, hey, you take a $6 million pay cut and give me that $6 million. In the 98 season, Scottie Pippen was the 6th highest paid player on his own team. He should have been the 2nd. Looking back at it now, especially after this documentary, Scottie Pippen is starting to get a lot more respect and a lot more credit that he deserves. Underappreciated and underpaid. Scottie Pippen, simply put, is the greatest Robin to anyone's Batman in the history of the NBA. Episode 3 brings us the Dennis Rodman saga. What do we know about Dennis Rodman that we didn't already know from this documentary? Nothing. From the very beginning, when Dennis Rodman entered the Bad Boy Pistons era, Dennis Rodman has always been a problem. We know that Dennis Rodman is the greatest rebounder of the basketball in the history of the NBA. Now, I know a lot of people want to argue Shaquille O'Neal, Hakeem Olajuwon, Bill Russell. You have all these big-name rebounders. I don't care. Dennis Rodman studied rebounding like Micheal Jordan studied an offense. I've never seen anything like Dennis Rodman rebounding a basketball to this day. Without Dennis Rodman, the Bulls do not three-peat. When Michael Jordan came back out of retirement and the Bulls had their next three-peat, Dennis Rodman was an integral part for the Chicago Bulls winning. He joined the Bulls, and in the 97-98 season, when Scottie Pippen elected to have his surgery at the beginning of the year, Dennis Rodman was Michael Jordan's go-to guy. He was the guy Michael could rely on every single night. Now, off-court antics aside, just focus on Dennis Rodman as the basketball player. Look at what he did when he was with the Pistons. Single-handedly shut down Scottie Pippen and knocked the Bulls out of the playoffs 2 years in a row. He is the only player in NBA history with 7 games of 20 rebounds and 0 points. Also in this episode, we see some pretty interesting things. We see Jordan miss a free throw to win a game, which in today's society and in today's media would be an enormous deal. I mean, if LeBron James missed that same free throw to win a game, we're having a completely different conversation. So it was interesting that they pointed out that, hey, Jordan did have flaws in this documentary. But then, of course, we witness one of Jordan's most iconic shots in playoff history. Against the Cavs, Michael Jordan runs down, pulls it up, and swish, the ball goes in. The shot heard around the world. This was the Michael Jordan that we all knew and came to love. I think that shot was very important, especially to Michael, because now Michael Jordan went from superstar to global star. That play was shown around the world for years to come. But back to Dennis Rodman. My takeaway from this episode, Dennis Rodman was the crazy glue that kept the Bulls together to win their last three-peat. If it wasn't for Phil Jackson, Dennis Rodman would have been a loose cannon, which he still was with the Bulls, but he respected Phil Jackson and respected Michael Jordan enough to where he gave them the best 3 years of his career in Chicago. Dennis Rodman might be insane. He might be crazy. Might wear nail polish. He might be the hardest person to understand. But man, I have never seen a greater rebounder, a greater defender of the basketball, all while wearing eyeliner, eyelashes, lipstick, fingernail polish, wedding dresses. Whatever it was that Dennis needed to be Dennis was good enough to help the Bulls win 3 straight titles. Next up, we got the father of the Bulls, Phil Jackson. The Last Dance episode 4 really did a deep dive on Phil Jackson and his legacy not only with the Bulls, but his legacy as a coach. We see Phil Jackson coaching in the CBA. We see Phil Jackson coaching overseas. We see Phil Jackson come to the Bulls as an assistant. We see Phil Jackson rise to the head coach of the Bulls. But we also see what Phil Jackson did that made the Bulls so great. Phil Jackson has always been a winner. He's a 2-time winner as a player with the Knicks, or the Knickerbockers, as they were back then. He's a CBA champion, an 11-time NBA champion. Phil made Michael Jordan a team player. That is the biggest difference in the Bulls winning 6 titles and Jordan still being able to go off and be Jordan, or the Bulls winning 3 titles and Jordan averaged 62 points a game. Phil Jackson created the triangle offense. He made Michael Jordan become a passer, an attacker, a scorer, a defender, all on the most elite levels, because Michael Jordan wasn't having to carry the burden of scoring 70 points a night. Phil Jackson was the greatest thing that could have happened to Michael Jordan in his career. Phil opened up Scottie Pippen to being an all-star.